At the beginning of November, global markets received a number that shook every forecast. China's exports to the United States plunged by 25% in October. This isn't just a number on a financial ticker. This is the clearest signal yet that the trade war we've been hearing about for years is now having a very real impact on the flow of global goods. For many Americans, this raises urgent questions. Are tariffs actually working? And more importantly, who is really paying the price for this? Today's in-depth report uses the latest economic data to map this uneven landscape of pain. We have analyzed data on export dependency, key industries, and recent job trends to identify the 10 states that are paying the highest price for the ongoing trade conflict. If you live in one of these states, you don't need a news report to tell you that trade wars have consequences. You see it in the closed factories, the unsold crops, and the rising prices at local stores. Let's begin our countdown of the 10 states bearing the heaviest burden. Number 10, North Carolina. North Carolina enters our list at number 10 due to a specific and potent combination of agricultural and manufacturing exposure. Historically, this state has been a global powerhouse in two key commodities, tobacco and textiles. Both have been heavily targeted by retaliatory tariffs. For decades, China was a premier destination for North Carolina's high-quality, flue-cured tobacco. Farms across the eastern part of the state relied on this consistent demand to maintain profitability. When tariffs were imposed, that demand evaporated almost overnight. Tobacco farmers, already facing a long-term domestic decline in smoking rates, found themselves without their most important growth market. Many multi-generational family farms have been forced to consolidate or shut down entirely. But the pain isn't limited to agriculture. North Carolina's textile industry, which had reinvented itself to focus on high-tech and specialized fabrics, also relies heavily on complex global supply chains. Tariffs on imported fibers and chemicals have driven up production costs, making these American-made textiles less competitive against foreign rivals who don't face the same tariff burdens. This has led to a silent squeeze in many small towns across the Piedmont region, where a single textile mill often serves as the primary economic engine. When that mill cuts, shifts, or closes its doors due to trade pressures, the entire community feels the impact. Number 9, Ohio. Moving to the Midwest, Ohio comes in at number 9, representing the classic double whammy of the trade war. Ohio's economy is uniquely balanced between heavy manufacturing and large-scale agriculture, and both sectors are in the crosshairs. In the western part of the state, you find vast stretches of farmland dedicated to soybeans and corn. Like their counterparts across the Midwest, these farmers have seen prices depressed for years due to the loss of the Chinese market. While government aid has provided some temporary relief, farmers here consistently say they prefer trade, not aid, knowing that long-term market access is far more valuable than short-term subsidies. Meanwhile, in the industrial hubs of eastern and northern Ohio, the pain comes from a different direction. Ohio is a vital part of America's automotive supply chain, producing everything from engines to transmissions. These factories rely on steel and aluminum. U.S. tariffs on imported metals have raised domestic prices for these critical inputs. This means an Ohio-based parts manufacturer now has to pay more for raw materials than a competitor in Mexico or Canada. This cost disadvantage makes it harder to win contracts from major automakers, leading to layoffs and reduced hours for factory workers. For Ohio, the trade war isn't just one problem. It's a squeeze from both sides of its economy. Number 8, Louisiana. At number 8, we have Louisiana, a state whose fortunes are inextricably linked to the Mississippi River. While Louisiana is not a top agricultural producer itself compared to Midwestern giants, it is America's great agricultural funnel. The Port of South Louisiana is one of the largest ports in the world by tonnage, largely because it is the primary exit point for American grain heading overseas. When China stopped buying U.S. soybeans, the impact was immediately felt on the docks of New Orleans and Baton Rouge. Grain elevators stood full. Barge traffic on the Mississippi slowed significantly. This slowdown ripples through the entire local economy. It affects not just the longshoremen who load the ships, but also the tugboat operators, the truck drivers, and the maritime support services that keep the river running. Furthermore, Louisiana's massive petrochemical industry has also faced headwinds. Many of the multi-billion-dollar expansion projects planned along the Gulf Coast were predicated on massive future demand from China for plastics and chemicals. Trade uncertainty has caused some of these projects to be delayed or scaled back, costing the state thousands of potential high-paying construction and manufacturing jobs. For Louisiana, global trade isn't an abstract concept. It's the lifeblood that flows past their levees every day. Number 7, Michigan. Michigan, the heart of the American automotive industry, lands at number 7. No industry has a more complex global supply chain than automotive. A typical car contains about 30,000 parts, many of which cross multiple borders before final assembly. The trade war has hit Detroit from multiple angles. First, in tariffs on steel and aluminum raised the base cost of every vehicle produced in the U.S. Second, specific tariffs on Chinese auto parts forced a costly and chaotic scrambling of supply chains. Automakers like GM, Ford, and Stellantis have had to spend billions resourcing components, costs that are inevitably passed on to consumers or absorbed as lower profits. This puts them at a disadvantage compared to foreign automakers who might have more flexible supply chains within Asia or Europe. Third, the Chinese market itself was once seen as the great future growth engine for U.S. automakers. Retaliatory tariffs and rising nationalism in China have hurt sales of U.S.-branded cars in the world's largest auto market. For the workers in Michigan, this translates into uncertainty. Investment dollars that might have gone into upgrading plants in Warren or Dearborn are instead being used to cover tariff costs or build new supply chains elsewhere. Number 6, Alabama. Alabama might be a surprising entry at number 6 for some, but it perfectly illustrates how the modern U.S. economy has changed. 20 years ago, Alabama would have been on this list solely for cotton. And indeed, cotton remains a crucial export for the state, with China historically being a massive buyer. Alabama cotton farmers have suffered immensely as Chinese textile mills shifted their purchasing to Brazil and Australia to avoid tariffs. But today's Alabama is also a major automotive and advanced manufacturing hub. Companies like Mercedes-Benz, Hyundai, Honda, and Toyota all have massive assembly plants in the state. Just like in Michigan, these plants rely on a global flow of parts. Tariffs have significantly increased the production costs for every SUV and sedan rolling off Alabama assembly lines. This threatens the Alabama economic miracle that has revitalized many parts of the state. Furthermore, Alabama has aggressively courted aerospace manufacturing, with Airbus establishing a major final assembly line in Mobile. Trade tensions with China also threaten the long-term growth of aircraft orders from Asian airlines, which is a key driver for future expansion in this sector. Alabama is facing a threat to both its traditional agricultural past and its high-tech manufacturing future. Number 5, Illinois. Breaking into the top 5 is Illinois, a state that serves as a microcosm of the entire U.S. trade relationship with China. First, there is the sheer scale of its agriculture. Illinois is consistently either the number 1 or number 2 soybean-producing state in the country. Before the trade war, roughly 60% of U.S. soybean exports went to China. When that market closed, Illinois farmers felt the impact immediately and acutely. Rural communities across the state saw farm incomes plummet, leading to less spending on Main Street and a rise in farm debt. But Illinois is also the home of industrial giants like Caterpillar and John Deere. These companies are double victims of the trade war. They face higher costs for the steel and components they need to build their massive machines. At the same time, their primary customers, farmers, have less money to buy new equipment because of falling crop prices. This cyclical negative feedback loop has led to layoffs at manufacturing plants in places like Decatur and Peoria. Moreover, Chicago serves as a massive inland logistics hub for goods coming from Asia. A slowdown in imports means less freight moving through the vast rail yards and warehouses that surround the city, impacting thousands of logistics jobs. Number 4, Washington. Washington State comes in at number 4, and its vulnerability can be summed up in 2 words: Boeing and agriculture. Washington is arguably the most trade-dependent state in the entire country. Boeing, the single largest U.S. exporter, has its primary manufacturing base here. China is projected to be the world's largest aviation market over the next 20 years. The trade war has effectively frozen Boeing out of significant new orders from Chinese airlines, who have increasingly turned to European rival Airbus. This isn't just a short-term loss, it's a potential generational shift in market share that threatens thousands of high-skilled aerospace jobs in the Puget Sound region. On the other side of the Cascade Mountains, Washington's diverse agriculture is also heavily exposed. It is a leading producer of apples, cherries, and wheat, all of which target Asian markets. Retaliatory tariffs have at times completely shut down exports of these perishable goods to China. Farmers have had to watch bumper crops rot in storage or have been forced to sell them at a loss in flooded domestic markets. For Washington, trade is not just a sector of the economy, it is the foundation of its prosperity. Number 3. Iowa. At number 3 is Iowa, the state that has become the political and economic ground zero for the agricultural impact of the trade war. Iowa's economy is fundamentally built on corn, soybeans, and pork. China was the consummate customer for all three. It bought soybeans to feed its massive hog herds, corn for processing, and U.S. pork to supplement its own domestic supply. When the trade war began, China targeted these specific commodities with surgical precision to maximize political pain in the U.S. heartland. The impact on Iowa has been devastating. Farm bankruptcies in the region ticked up to their highest levels in a decade. The mental health toll on farming communities has been immense, as multi-generational farmers face the real prospect of losing land that had been in their families since the 1800s. While federal subsidies have kept many afloat, these payments are a tenuous lifeline dependent on political winds in Washington. Iowa farmers know that without a normalized trade relationship with China, their business model is fundamentally broken. They can produce more efficiently than anyone else in the world, but they cannot compete against a 25% tariff wall. Number 2, Texas. Texas takes the number 2 spot due to the sheer scale of its export economy. It is, by a wide margin, the largest exporting state in America. Its exposure to China is massive and diversified, primarily centered on energy and technology. Before the trade tensions, China was becoming a massive customer for U.S. crude oil and liquefied natural gas, LNG, most of which flows out of Texas ports. The trade war has severely dampened this booming trade. Chinese buyers have turned to Russia, Saudi Arabia, and other suppliers to meet their energy needs, leaving Texas producers to find other, often less lucrative markets. This has slowed investment in new infrastructure along the Gulf Coast. Meanwhile, Texas is also a major technology hub, with Austin and Dallas serving as critical nodes in the global electronics supply chain. Companies like Dell and Texas Instruments rely heavily on cross-border trade for components and final assembly. Tariffs on electronics have squeezed margins and forced expensive supply chain realignments. For Texas, a state that prides itself on being bigger and bolder, the trade war has been a massive drag on what could have been even faster economic growth. Number 1, California. And finally, the state paying the highest price for the trade war is California. It is an inescapable reality simply due to its geography and economic structure. California is America's gateway to Asia. The twin ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach handle roughly 40% of all containerized imports entering the United States. Whatever happens in U.S.-China trade happens here first and most intensely. When traders rush to beat new tariffs, these ports face chaotic congestion. When tariffs take effect and trade slows, the docks go quiet, and thousands of truckers, warehouse workers, and logistics specialists see their incomes drop. But it goes far beyond the ports. California's massive agricultural sector, specifically its high-value crops like almonds, pistachios, and wine, was specifically targeted by Chinese retaliation. Almond growers in the Central Valley spent years cultivating the Chinese market, only to see it virtually disappear, forcing them to rip out orchards that take years to mature. And then there is Silicon Valley. The global technology industry was effectively built on a U.S.-China axis, designed in California, assembled in China. Breaking this axis is incredibly costly and complex for giants like Apple, Google, and countless smaller hardware startups. The uncertainty has chilled investment and forced a painful decoupling that is still playing out. From the docks of Long Beach to the orchards of the Central Valley, to the boardrooms of Palo Alto, no state has more skin in the game than California. Deep dive, the human cost. Beyond the macroeconomic data, the human cost of this trade war is profound and often overlooked. In North Carolina, we see aging textile workers, many of whom have spent their entire lives in the mills, facing uncertain futures as factories close their doors. Retraining programs are often insufficient or inaccessible for older workers, leading to long-term unemployment and community decline. In Ohio, the stress on family farms is palpable. Suicide rates among farmers have risen, a tragic indicator of the immense financial and emotional pressure they are under. Community banks, which are the lifeblood of rural economies, are also feeling the strain as loan defaults increase. In Michigan, auto workers are facing reduced hours and the constant threat of layoffs. This economic insecurity ripples through the entire community, affecting local businesses, schools, and public services. In California, the high cost of living combined with job losses in key sectors is driving many families to leave the state in search of more affordable opportunities elsewhere. This California exodus is reshaping the demographics of the Western United States. Political repercussions. The economic pain is also having significant political repercussions. In swing states like Ohio, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, the trade war is a potent political issue. Candidates from both parties are scrambling to address the concerns of voters who feel left behind by globalization. Some advocate for even tougher protectionist measures, while others call for a return to free trade. But for many voters, the damage is already done, and trust in the political establishment has eroded. Future outlook. Looking ahead, the future remains uncertain for these 10 states. While some industries may eventually adapt and find new markets, others may be permanently diminished. The long-term impact of the trade war will depend on a variety of factors, including future trade policies, global economic conditions, and the ability of these states to innovate and diversify their economies. One thing is clear: the trade war has fundamentally altered the economic landscape of the United States, creating new winners and losers. Conclusion. Looking at this map of pain, one thing becomes clear: the costs of a national trade strategy are not borne equally by all citizens. They are concentrated in specific communities, industries, and states. While policymakers in Washington may see tariffs as a necessary tool for long-term strategic competition, for a soybean farmer in Iowa or a dock worker in California, they are an immediate threat to their livelihood. As this economic decoupling continues, the question remains: will the rest of the country be willing to support the states that are on the front lines of this economic conflict, or will these communities be left to adapt on their own to a new, harsher global reality? We have seen who is losing the most in this shift. But in every major economic realignment, there are also winners. Are there any U.S. states that might actually benefit from factories leaving China and returning to North America? We will go in search of those potential bright spots in our next detailed report. Make sure you are subscribed so you don't miss it.